Hello friends, welcome to part 26 of my Tesla Q4 2022 earnings forecast video review series. I am joined by my co-host Loki, who is looking exceptionally cute for the occasion of the final video in this 26-part series. Just doing what chihuahuas do and shivering a little bit. I promise he's not cold. He's got his warm bed and his warm blankie there and his stuffed bunny, so he's feeling good. And I will return to share my desktop and show you on the previous slide we looked at the gross margin percentage. You can keep an eye on Loki right down here while I'm talking about Tesla stuff if you'd rather see his cute antics. So we looked at gross margin as the last slide in the previous video. In the next slide, I used this info to do some charts about automotive if you exclude leased from it. So that's what these rows are doing. They're bringing in the automotive cash sale units versus the leased units sold, and it's showing you what the totals are combined. Then you've got the same breakdown for revenue and for cost of sales, and then for ASPs and cost of sales per vehicle and cost of sales percentages. So the percentages down here make more sense as individual metrics for leased than the leased sales ASP does. You'll see this number hopping around like crazy over time because it's not really a valid accounting metric to say, hey, my leased revenue was this dollar amount, so I'm going to divide that by that quarter's leased units sold, because the leased revenue includes revenue from the previous 12 quarters as well as the deliveries that happened during that quarter. So you can sometimes see some weird numbers here and be like, hey, how does that jump around so much? It's just taking the reported leased revenue number divided by the reported leased deliveries from that quarter, which doesn't always come out to the same number. So you don't have a lot of meaningful takeaways from reviewing that row. But for cost of sales percentage, that does hover closer to 60% most of the time, or it has been for many quarters now, with the cash sales cost of sales percentage higher at around 70% most of the time. You can see regulatory credit sales are the big influence on when cash sales, cost of sales, get a lot better in the quarters when there were a lot of regulatory credit sales. Well, actually not that great back in Q1 of 2021. It must have been bad for other reasons. So here's what I have forecast for Q4 and for 2023. More of the same. Then below regulatory credits, we've got automotive sales excluding leasing and credits. So that's more of your, if all Tesla did was sell cars and not lease and not sell regulatory credits, how much would that be? Then cost of sales excluding leasing is here, ASP excluding leasing and credits, cost of sales per vehicle excluding leasing. So you can see that number has risen some this year relative to where it was recently. That's got some to do with shifting away from Model 3 to more Model Y mix, a little bit higher cost per vehicle probably. And the ramping of Giga Austin and Berlin isn't helping the cost of sales per vehicle because they're low in the ramp. They're probably below break even, or were for some of this time. Then gross profit dollars per cash sale. This is a good metric to follow. This looks pretty good. I'm not even forecasting very aggressively in Q4. I've got it down versus where it's been for the past 5 quarters of actuals. So gross profit percent on cash sales, in the same range where it's been. And then non-GAAP EPS, excluding regulatory credits. So if regulatory credits were not a thing, what would the non-GAAP EPS be? You can see Tesla would never have had non-GAAP EPS more than $1 in any quarter, with the highest ever being 97 cents here in Q3 of 2022, the most recent quarter. This includes 45 cents worth of that one-time tax benefit. So if you knock 45 cents off, this would be $1.02. So a little bit of growth on a whole lot of deliveries growth due to some inefficiencies with cost, etc., and price reductions and promotional offers. So this next slide is the per diluted share section. I put in all caps, in bold, in red, so that you would know what you were looking at. This is the income statement except all the numbers divided by the share count. So it gives you everything per share. And I use this to make a chart, a stacked bar chart that shows you how much revenue there is. So these items at the top of the P&L summary here, totaling up to $7.57 per share worth of revenue is what's in my forecast for Q4. And then you've got the total cost of sales underneath that. So total cost of sales also rising along with the revenue because you've got more cars to sell. It's going to cost you more to make them, right? So that's those, giving you gross margin that's growing all the time because the revenue per share is growing by faster than the cost per share is growing. So that gives you gross margin lift. I put a check figure in here because it's a good idea when you're making a spreadsheet to put a check figure in sometimes and try calculating the same number two different ways and make sure they both come out to the same answer. Then you can see research and development, SG&A, restructuring, and other. These are not getting very much bigger than they were years ago because the stock-based compensation for Elon has been coming down as the other costs have been rising. So not a lot more total operating expense per share now than there was a while ago, giving more income or loss from operations. So you've been growing the revenue by more than you've been growing the cost of sales. That means you've been growing your gross margins to larger amounts than they've ever been before, so long as you don't give it back at the operating expense line by letting these costs get out of control. You're also going to be growing your income or loss from operations per share, which is what this shows. And I've got a ton of growth coming in the future for this line. Then you've got income expense and interest expense. Tesla's interest expense has been declining as they've been paying down their long-term debt to very small numbers now. And Tesla's interest income only very recently got bigger than 1 penny. It was 2 cents last quarter. So I'm forecasting 3 cents worth of interest income per share for Tesla. Probably some treasury notes or something that Tesla bought last quarter that'll be paying them more interest this quarter, unless they sell it. Not sure why they would. This is probably just a good place to park some of your cash that you're not using. It's a great thing when interest rates are rising to have more interest income than you have interest expense. Most of Tesla's competitors are paying a lot more in interest expense than they have in interest income. And provision or benefit for income taxes, you can see this negative number again as my assumption that Tesla will be taking a one-time tax benefit this quarter. If they don't, you'll see a more normal number here. And then either they'll take it in a future quarter or they won't. I don't really have a great feel for whether they're going to take it this quarter or not, but it's in my forecast. And that's how you get to total GAAP net income per share of $1.47. And even if you knock off that 45-cent tax benefit, you still have $1.02. So the numbers down here are not the share counts. These are everything per share. So I'm telling you at the bottom here, shares outstanding per diluted share is always 1 every quarter. When you take the total diluted share count and you divide it into the total diluted share count, it's always 1, no matter what. But you can see how much the shares outstanding basic are relative to the shares outstanding diluted Remember, this one includes options that have vested but have not been exercised yet, like the ones Elon earned through his 2018 CEO compensation plan that he has not exercised any of yet. He hasn't bought those shares yet. So on this next slide, you can see a summary of that EPS stacked bar chart info where I've got the revenue at the top, the costs below it, and then a few different ways of doing EPS. So the first one here is the non-GAAP EPS of $1.57, and then I'm knocking off 11 cents worth of stock-based compensation to get to the $1.47 with rounding. This must be not quite 11 cents. It must be 10.5 cents or something. And then if you lop off the deferred tax asset benefit I've been talking about, it would get you down to adjusted non-GAAP EPS. $1.57 minus 45 cents would be $1.12. So even if Tesla takes this 45-cent benefit I'm forecasting, Wall Street will back it out, and after they do, they'll say the earnings were $1.12, if I'm right about the $1.57 worth of non-GAAP EPS before making that adjustment. All right. Then at the bottom of the page, I also have the stock compensation on a per share basis as well. So that's all down here to get you to the non-GAAP earnings of $1.57. Here's 11 cents. This one line here isn't stock compensation. This is the other kinds of corporate headquarters expenses that you have. So legal and human resources and security and finance and whatever other jobs you need to have in a corporate headquarters. That's what's this 26-cent forecast. And what do I have next? And that's it. That's the end of the presentation, which means that was the last slide in my forecast deck. So that's the end of my Tesla earnings forecast review video series. What happens next? Well, Tesla will report production and deliveries, and then we'll have actuals, and then I'll go back and revisit my forecast, plug in what we've learned from that report, which is normally just that. So combined S and X, production and deliveries, combined 3 and Y, production and deliveries, leased vehicles percent, and that's about it, unless they tell us something else in the release. And so I'll be adjusting my forecast over the next few days after that, as I have time, and then hopefully recording fresh videos where I can update you on what my forecast is before Tesla earnings come out in mid to late January. And with that, I will say, if you've enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, why not go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And there's links in the video description if you want to support me through ways other than just liking, subscribing, commenting. And a special thank you to my executive producers, Kathy Kitchler and Halter Ferguson Financial. And I'll see you in the next one.